it's indeed wonderful to be at this conference in which we shall reflect about being a synodal church. That is, we shall reflect about the journeying of the church in our time. Really, aren't we extremely privileged to live in a most fascinating and interesting time in the history of the church? We are not just witnesses of a church that is changing as previous members of the people of God basically witnessed from a distance the Second Vatican Council. No, we all, as we are sitting here and with so many people out there, are active participants in a process of change. At the same time, we are invited to take a bit of a distance and reflect about what is happening in that process and what are the right and next steps to be taken. We are invited to listen to the Spirit, and we are invited on a meta level to reflect in the Spirit as to what we observe. Time and again, we must ask, how can it best contribute to the edification of the church in the sense of its core mission? So here we are as participants and analysts. One could say, whereas the Holy Spirit is the protagonist guiding us in the journey, we are as participants in the driving seat, and with the help of drones, we take a little distance to observe and analyze where the journey is taking the travelers, what path is followed, with whom is the journey undertaken, which other people are invited to join in, and which ones are overlooked. We can observe what challenges are being met, how some build bridges to help connect different ideas and worlds of people. We can see which crossroads are encountered, how and why a turn to the left or to the right or straight forward is taken. We might observe that the people of God are delighted to know that instead of crossroads with traffic lights, which risk bringing the community to a full stop, there are roundabouts. Once on the roundabout, we can see how the people of God are going around a few times. You know this. If you don't know which exit to take, you think, okay, I'll take another round. It might well be that those in the car have not agreed yet as to what might be the right path forward. Heated debates, some threatening to leave the journey, but then we may observe the deep desire to preserve unity and thus a willingness to continue the journey together. Hence, another round on the roundabout is taken, because listening to each other and discerning together in the Spirit requires time. They might discover that there is not just one right road to exit this roundabout. As the saying goes, many roads lead to Rome. So considering the different points of departure, time-wise and local-wise, the different options on how to travel, by foot, by horse, by car, by train, by plane, the different resources available, some will continue along one path, the others along another. But they will all go with the same intention, goal, and guided by the same Holy Spirit. All are looking to live as good Christians and search the will of God in their time, place, and circumstances. Hence, there is a deep unity which unfolds in diversity to achieve what the Spirit is calling us to. All are pondering together the question, what is the Spirit saying to us, the church, not just to where to go and what to do, but above all, how to do it together. No one is to be left out. By the way, this is not just traveling for the sake of traveling. This is an eschatological journey. It's a journey in communion with God and with each other towards the fullness of life in the triune God. You will find that in the Instrumentum Laboris. The journey is the destination. The process has two phases. Currently, we are at a phase of listening and a phase of discerning. Currently, we are at a decisive moment in that synodal journey. After the listening phase, in which all were invited to participate, we are now moving to the discernment phase, in which in particular the bishops are asked to exercise their ministry of service. Some other members of the faithful will journey with them in this phase. From the beginning, the Bishop of Rome has participated in the listening. The Bishop of Rome, I say this very carefully and consciously, the Bishop of Rome has participated in the listening and will do now the same in the discernment phase. Finally, in his function as Pope, he will exercise his ministry of unity and identify where and how the journey is to continue. But we are not there yet. So let us take the opportunity to reflect briefly about the journey so far and then focus on the upcoming meeting of bishops within the Synod in October 2023. Of course, the 2023 Instrumentum Laboris, which was just published this week, will be part of my reflections. The latter cannot be understood and appreciated without taking a step back, move to a higher level, and recall and reflect briefly on the journey so far. Indeed, this Instrumentum Laboris, we call it a working document, states very clearly that it's built on this previous phase. So what has happened so far? Pope Francis opened the Synod in October 2021, and a week later, the diocesan bishops opened the Synod in their respective dioceses. People around the world were invited, and they responded. In parishes and groups, in movements and associations, in religious institutes, they met to listen. People were asked, what do you believe with regard to the Church and the steps that the Holy Spirit is inviting us to take? From the reactions from around the world, we know that this in particular touched the people deeply. All over the world, one could hear, you are asking me? My faith matters? It matters to you? My struggle and my search for answers matter to others? And then the answer was, yes, you and your faith matter. And that was something new, and is something new, for the Catholic community around the world. So they're not just receivers anymore, but the relationship that God has with every single person is to be listened to and to be heard and discerned together by all. So the people of God rediscovered baptism as a foundation. They became aware of the beauty and richness of different charisms as gifts for the edification of the Church and its mission. They expressed their concerns and challenges, as well as their hopes and longings. Sure, some are skeptical, but the journey has begun, and slowly more and more people are getting interested. The uniqueness of this journey is that everybody can join at any time. It's not true that the train has departed and I missed it. You can join and all your friends can join at any time, and it is an ongoing journey. The stage in which we are moving does not imply that at the local level we now watch and see what is going on at another level. No, we are invited to continue and deepen the process of listening and seeing what already can and in any case must be done locally. So a number of bishops' conferences have put their national reports and their continental reports now on their agenda to say, what are the people actually saying in our country? And what are we to listen to? And what do we already have to do and can do, for which we don't need to wait of outcomes in Rome? But let me return to the discernment that occurred in the local churches last summer. Findings of the first listening were submitted to the Episcopal conferences. And I am part of the steering group of the Worldwide Synod in Rome, so I have indeed the privilege of seeing all these reports and reading all these reports. So I will speak a little bit about that experience as well. So last fall, a group of approximately 28 people from all over the world, this was new too, from all over the world, gathered in Frascati, a town outside of Rome, to listen what the Spirit had already evoked by analyzing the reports of 112 out of 114 Episcopal conferences. So that means 98% or something, they all responded. And 15 out of 23 Eastern churches responded. Submissions by the Digital Synod, which was organized, were submitted. We had the conferences of major superiors of religious, of men and women responded, dicasteries of the Roman Curia, and there were over 1,000 submissions from smaller or larger groups to the Secretariat of the Synod in Rome directly. The document from the Continental States writes that those who were in Frascati expressed enthusiastically in one line what they felt had come to the fore, and that one line was, the Synod is on. They present 3 reasons for this enthusiasm. First, an overwhelming participation, as I just said, or an overwhelming response from around the world. Second, the content of the submissions, which showed that the people were not only grateful for discovering what it means to be a synodal church, but also that they want to continue and above all deepen it. And thirdly, considering that people do live in very different circumstances around the world, there is a surprising and remarkable convergence on the topics that need to be addressed. The Frascati group sees the convergence as a sign of the working of the Holy Spirit. It does not mean that the reports did not express tensions, they did, but the tensions are with regard to the same topics around the world. You can imagine when we were traveling there, we all thought, oh my God, what is going to happen if one part of the world goes in this direction and another goes in another direction? How shall we hold the whole thing together? And then we were surprised to really see that the issues are the same all over the world. After the listening in the local churches, the second step in the listening phase occurred in several continental meetings. Now you will say, oh, wait a minute, in school I learned there are 5 continents, how come they have 7? This was not a multiplication by the Lord of continents, I can tell you that. But North and South America had 2 separate meetings, and the Middle East had a separate meeting because of the Eastern churches, and they could not just be, it would not have been just for either Asia or the Middle East to put them together. And the purpose of that meeting in the continental meeting was what is called a restitutio. It was a giving back to the people what had been received, while asking the question, did we really hear what you said? It was also to provide for an opportunity to get to know the contribution of other parts of the world. Hence, it was an opportunity to learn about the gifts that the Holy Spirit had distributed to other local churches. So if you are from Dublin, you were invited through the Prague meeting, but you were invited basically in a continent to learn what did they say in Madrid, and what did they, or in Spain, and what did they say in Hungary, and what have the people responded in Belgium. And then if you bring these continental documents in dialogue with each other later, you can see what did they say in Asia, and what did they say, and what is specific about Asia, and what is specific about Europe, and what is specific about Oceania. So it's an opportunity to learn about the deep meaning of Catholicity. Catholicity really means to bring the gifts for the edification of the church, the local churches as well as the different people with their charisms, bring their gifts for the good of the whole church. This working document unfolds this notion of Catholicity rather strongly when it affirms that the continental meetings brought to the fore. The continental meetings had to respond to 3 questions. What intuitions resonates most strongly with your experience and realities in your continent? What is new, what is illuminating? Second, what tensions or divergencies emerge from your continental perspective? And 3, considering the first 2, which should be the subjects for the meeting in October 2023? The meetings in the continents show some remarkable aspects. First, last fall, the Episcopal conferences were consulted around the world, and they were asked, would you want to meet in these conferences as bishops alone, or with the presence of other members of the faithful? The bishops' conferences were surprised that they were asked. That was something new, because in the past, Rome would just tell them what to do. And it was so new that some didn't even respond to the question. But from those who responded, the overwhelming majority said, we wish to meet with people, other members of the people of God. Now you will hear time and again, I will never say the bishop and the people of God. I will always say the bishop and the other people of God, because the bishop is part of the people of God. And we should not just use the word the bishop and the laity, because then we forget the priest. and the deacons and the religious. So it's the bishop and the other people of God. The overwhelming response was so therefore that they met with the other members of the faithful, and therefore these continental meetings are now qualified as ecclesial meetings. It's a meeting of the church. Men and women ordained, religious and lay participated. It's a new chapter in the history of the church. Second, in a spirit of decentralization and respect for different cultures and circumstances, Rome consciously left it to the continents to decide about the composition, the modality, the organization, and the method used. All it asked was to ensure that there would be a good representation of men, women, and people living in situations of marginalization as well as non-Catholics. Father Vimal Tiramani, who is here he's from Sri Lanka originally, had the privilege of participating in Asia, and I'm sure he will share something with us about his experience in Asia. I had the privilege to be part of the drafting team of the document in Prague, so the meeting in Europe. And we both noticed, as we were speaking, we have known each other for many, many years, we noticed that the different continents held rather different meetings. Indeed, Catholicity unfolds here. It's a diversity in unity. And so I'm really pleased to inform you that we are currently editing a book in which we describe the differences between all the continents so that we can capture this moment of what is really happening there. And we see there were different liturgies and even things like the way they met and had set up the chairs and the rooms. So you are in what we call a theater style meeting, but there were continents in which they met at round tables. And that caused a whole different dynamic in the group. 5 minutes left and 7 pages to go. We started a little later. It will help the Synod in Rome also on where we are going. The third aspect, despite the different formats of ecclesial meetings in the continent, there is a great convergence between the 7 reports. Similar to the reports of the national conferences, they really address the same subject. So I strongly urge you to read that document from Prague and to read the document of Ireland and maybe to read a few other documents. So we will go a bit quicker. The Instrumentum Laboris that came out just this week. The meeting is going to be in October. We will have a meeting of 370 persons, and approximately 80 of these people will be non-bishops. In real life, there will be probably a few more non-bishops in the room because there will be moderators of sessions and there will be theological advisors. So this will be larger. And from those 80 non-bishops, the idea is that 50% of them will be women. Innovative in the process will be the method and the organization. So in the past, people could speak, every participant could speak for 3 minutes. This has been changed. People will have to work more in small groups. And to help them also to enter into a method that was introduced by the Synod, it's called a method of spiritual conversation, by which people have a deep listening to each other. And that is one of the fruits of the Continental Meeting, because it was valued by every continent that this was a new method and a method that would produce fruits. So both roundtables will be used in Rome, in the Vatican, for the first time too, and we will have a different meeting. In Rome, the Synod will work in 5 languages: English, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish. But the meeting in October is not a meeting of decision-making, it's a meeting of discerning and identifying in particular what are the next things that we need to investigate, that we listen to theologically, canonically. The word canon law comes a lot in the Instrumentum Laboris. What kind of things are needed? The document is grouped around the 3 themes: communion, mission, and participation. And after an introduction into where we were and a theological reflection about this, which is not too long, that is new too, there are 15 working sheets. So each topic, communion, mission, participation, has 5 sub-themes. And in these 5 subteams, the people will go, they can themselves decide in which group they want to go. But the idea is that these 5 teams are basically focusing on one aspect, but the entrance point is a different one. But at the end, they all will have to come together. I will give you an example that came up very strongly, and I think the European document had this particularly, but you also see it in other ones, but the European document formulated the need to see love and truth as meeting each other. So in setting the context, this subsection recalls the widening of the tent, and in which we had used in the document on the continental states, and then it speaks about the remarriage, divorce, the people in polygamous relationships, LGBTQ plus people. And the question is, how can we continue to make meaningful and concrete steps to offer justice to victims and survivors of abuse and other forms of abuse by persons within the church? How can we create space for those who feel hurt and unwelcomed by the church? And then, for example, it said, because of their status or sexuality. Under the heading of mission, co-responsibility, how can the church of our time better fulfill its mission through greater recognition and promotion of the baptismal dignity of women? This is one of the 5 themes for that cluster. And it then asks, what can the church do, or what steps can be taken to renew and reform its procedures, institutional arrangements and structures to enable greater recognition and participation of women in governance, decision-making processes, and in taking the decisions in a spirit of communion and with a view to vision. You can hear the question is how. It's not an either or. The questions are not to be answered with a yes or no. It's how can we improve, how we can get better, how can we assist. So it's an open questions, but we will hear the voices from people from around the world of what can be done and what is needed. In the 3rd point, this is on participation. It's in particular on the discernment practices and decision-making processes. And the question is, how can we, again, for example, the points for reflection raise questions on how to foster the participation of women, of young people, minorities, marginalized in discernment and decision-making processes. So again, the issue of women is coming up there too. I come to a conclusion. With this whole synodal process, the Church has already embarked on a new chapter in the reception of Vatican II, the style of working, the language used, the way difficult topics are addressed, raising questions rather than repeating doctrine, but above all, the invitation to the whole people of God to participate in listening, because there is the belief that each and every one has something to say and contribute, testifies to the change. The synodal journey is an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing process which by nature is incomplete. For some people, it's difficult to live with incompleteness. It causes a kind of restlessness, but it's an invitation. It requires not to be afraid of tensions and not to be tempted to resolve them at any cost, but rather to hold them while we discern, so that they do not bring about destructive polarizations. Are we to wait for the outcome of the Synod? No. The whole Church continues to be invited to join and keep engaging in the process locally, regionally, and then on a universal level. I encourage you to continue in your local church to practice and implement being a synodal church. Thank you for your attention.